live in the U.S., in the middle of the U.S., spring has sprung. And I have been doing a lot of my echo printing using the new sprouts coming up, new leaves, weeds in my lawn, whatever is popping, I'm going around and I'm harvesting. So I wanted to show some of the latest things that I've done to try and inspire you to get out there in your yard. I know I get a lot of questions about how do you do this? The truth is, well, first of all, let me backtrack. When I first started, I couldn't find hardly any information. I really researched this for about a year before I actually did anything. I first wanted to do the echo printing on the fabric, and it just seemed way too complicated, and you needed various things, and you needed silk, and you needed wool and felt, and all these things that I did not have, and I didn't want to go out and purchase if it didn't work. So I just kept watching, the pictures and different videos that were out there that had to do with that. Then I found a blog that geared more toward paper. And I thought, okay, that I can do. I've got paper all over the place. And I know you can buy cheap paper. I mean, there's expensive paper, but there's also very cheap paper. So I decided last September to try my first boil, which I have that video up. I'll put a link to that below there. And it's basically, I had done one set, and I posted pictures, and people really, really were fascinated by it because they had not been exposed to this kind of printing on paper. So they said, how did you do it? How do you do it? Well, I'd only done it once. So I said, well, I'll show you what I did. I don't know what else to tell you, but this is what I did. So I did the video on my second try. And then they asked me more and more questions, and I just didn't have the answers because that was my second time doing it. And I really had no experience other than literally what I was showing you on the video. Well, various ones have started experimenting themselves, and they're coming up with some really cool prints. And so as I do more prints, I'll post them either in my group or on my Facebook page, and I get the same questions. And it's hard to answer. And I know it sounds like I'm being evasive, but it's almost like if you see if you're a mixed media artist, if you see somebody's art journal and you really, really like it, and you want to make a spread that looks just like it, the mixed media artist is going to say, well, I can't explain to you how I did it. I put this on there, then I covered that up, and then I put some more of this, and I covered that up, and I don't remember what this was, and you're not going to have the same image from a magazine that she used, and you don't have the same paint. You can't replicate it. You just can't. And even the artist can't explain to you how to do it. Even if you had the exact same things that she has, it's very, very difficult. The same thing really kind of happens with these echo printings. I'm not trying to be evasive. It's just that each time I do it, I do something different. I don't think I've ever done the same thing twice because I'm trying to experiment to see what I like. And I'm almost sorry that I haven't taken notes each time I did something so that I myself could copy it, let alone, to share with other people. I really can't reproduce what I did, in batch 4. I can't reproduce it in batch 50, So I'm not trying to be evasive. I've given a lot of information on that first video, more than I found anywhere else. That's a lot of information put together that I got from various places, because at that particular time there weren't any videos out there of how to do the echo dyeing on paper. Now there's a few that have come on and shown what they've done, but at the time I had to really hunt to figure out how to do this. All right, having said that, you're going to have, if this interests you, you're just going to have to experiment like I did. You're going to have to use all different types of papers and see what works for you. You're going to have to use the plants that are in your region. You know, you may not have access to the plants that I do. Most of the stuff I use literally is grown in my yard. So I have certain trees, I have certain weeds, and those are the things that I experiment with. And then also I go cruising in parking lots. They already know me at Home Depot. I go steal their leaves. Last fall, I was there raking up all their leaves because I had tested a few of their leaves and they worked really, really good. So I went back with my bag and the guy said, "Are you here for leaves again?" I go, "Yes." So that was my source. And then a lot of these plants that I get the leaves from that aren't in my yard, I don't know what they are. So I can't tell you, oh, you know, go find this tree and that tree and it works really well, because I don't even know what they are. So I guess what I'm telling you is that you're going to have to really experiment with what you have around you and use the basic principles that I laid out in the original video, and then experiment just like I did. I experimented with different kinds of vegetables and fruits. Some worked, some didn't. I experimented with some papers. Some worked, some didn't. I find that for my journals, what I do is I just use copy paper. My original ones were watercolor paper, which came out nice, don't get me wrong. But if you're making just regular, like a journal, junk journal type, the watercolor is obviously too thick. And so I thought, well, maybe if I use copy paper, it's going to all fall apart. Let me try. Well, it is very, thin, and it can tear very easily when it's wet, obviously. So, it's a balance of being gentle with your papers, letting them cool down a certain amount, being gentle if you're going to rinse them. You just got to get a feel for it. So you can use the thickest of papers, and I've used very thin papers, and it's just a matter of being gentle, basically. The different papers you use, even if you use the same dye bath and the same flowers or leaves or whatever, but you use a different paper, it's going to print differently because of the thickness, the weave, whatever was used to make it stick together. It's all, the makeup is different. Even I like to use file folders. I like the feel of it for making certain things like cards or postcards or tags. I like how it feels. There again, though, I get all of my file folders at consignment shops or garage sales or whatever. And so it's various companies. And even the file folders, they're made differently. And they print differently, even under the exact same circumstances. I'll go in and put from various batches various places of the manila folders, I'll put them inside of the same boil, and they will print the exact same flowers and leaves differently. So that's why I say I can't tell you how I did any one thing, because it doesn't make any difference, because it's not going to be the same thing, the same way for you. Having said that, I'll show examples of different papers that I've used, and I will tell you what I boiled, but it doesn't mean that it's going to come out the same. Now, for these right here are some scraps of watercolor paper that were given to me. And I don't know the weight, but I think it's like 140, 160, something like that. And so what I did with these are just the white clover that is in the lawn, those weeds that pop up all over the place. And all of this color All this yellow came from the clover. I didn't put no yellow. I didn't do anything. And that's what happens when you boil them. They turn this yellow color. Shortly before I finished the boil, I put in a little bit of my homemade sprays, and that's the blue that you see. And so you can use, you know, whatever colors you want to use to achieve, you know, different kinds of looks, or just leave them plain, because it does change the water. I mean, the color in the water, you know, is always changing. That's one example. These right here are pieces of manila folder that I just cut up. And on here, most of these are a bush that I have in my yard that I have no clue what it is. It only blooms in the spring, and it has these little white flowers. If you imagine hydrangeas and think of it miniature, about that size, that's what they look like to me. And it's all white, and it only blooms in the spring. But this is what it did. It turned yellow also. Now what happened with these, this particular batch right here, is I put it in the boil, and I usually boil things anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, just depending on my mood, on my test, whatever I'm doing. These had only been in there about 20 minutes when I had to abruptly, on an emergency, leave the house. So I turned off the fire, obviously, and I left them in the pot. Well, that was like about 3 in the afternoon. One thing led to another. I did not get home until midnight. They were still in the pot. And so in the morning, I thought, well, you know, I don't want to boil them anymore. They've been sitting in this water. They're probably just going to fall apart. So I took them out. So I think that's why these look more like a ghost print, because these were only boiled for an hour. I mean, a half hour. More like 20 minutes. Now this red you see is that I had some dried hibiscus that you use to make tea, and I had thrown it in the water. So that is the hibiscus. Of course, it didn't get boiled except for a few minutes, so I guess it didn't really let all of its color out, and it was more of a pink instead of a red. So that's an example of what happens. But it's, like I say, I won't be able to do these ever again because I'm not going to have them sit in the water, you know, for like 12 hours for no reason. So this is just an example of what happens there. Now these were tags that were in my stash. I don't know what they were made out of. They were white. They aren't quite as thick as a file folder, maybe just slightly thinner than a file folder. Now these I printed with leaves that I had harvested in the fall, and I threw them in the freezer. And then when I decided to do these, I took some of them out of the freezer and did my my printing on these. Now halfway through, I threw in some more of my homemade dyes, and that is the pinkish color that you see. The blues that you see in there were dried morning glories that I had, the blue ones. And the actual shape didn't come out, but the color did bleed on the paper. So again, am I going to be able to duplicate these? Probably not. I could try, you know, when the summer comes and my morning glories start blooming, I could grab a few of those and see if I can get them to bleed again the way that they did on this particular boil. But will they? I don't know. We will have to see if it does or if it does not. Okay, so these I probably can't duplicate. this one because I don't know exactly what kind of watercolor or the thickness that is. This because I don't know what they're made out of, and I don't have any more of those. And these I probably won't be sitting stuff in the water overnight. So these are kind of like one of a kind. I did a bunch of papers past couple of weeks, and these are a few examples of some of the ones that I've done. Again, you know, they're like jelly prints. They're never going to be two alike. They're all different, and you probably can't make it happen again. That's those. These here again, I used some of the morning glories that I had saved, and you can see that again, you don't see the shape, but you do see the color bleed that comes through, which is pretty cool. That one you can almost see the shape there. You don't see the shape there either. So, but you get the idea. It's all a hit and miss. There you go with those. Then I wanted some more darker, dramatic looking ones. So with these particular ones, what I did is in the water, I put a, let's see, it was an old rusty chain and a rusty pipe, and I think a little bit of vinegar. And so then I came out with some of these darker tones in these prints. So I really like how these came out. And so I'll be putting these, some of these will be part of the sample pack that I sell in my shop, but I'm going to save some of these for a journal that I have in mind. These colors will work out really good. I like how these came out. And again, these leaves were the ones that I had frozen from the fall. And I like how these came out. These were some weeds I had in the yard. I did those recently. I posted those pictures. And there you go. And this was on these that I showed you. These were all on just regular copy paper. Now these were done on what's called newsprint paper? No, I think so. I forget what it's called right now. It's a little bit thicker than, it's about the same as the folder, about the same. These also have leaves that I defrosted, that I had frozen. And then this here is a branch from that plant that I told you give those little small flowers, those white flowers that I don't know the name. And then at the end, what I did with these is I put in some of my color at the very end to soak in on the edges. I like how these came out. So I have a journal that I want to put a few of these in, but the rest will be in my shop. I like that one. This is pretty cool too. Alrighty. So this is kind of like the thickness of cardstock. Now these here were done at the same time that these were done. So I don't know how they would look with a full boil. They just boiled for about 20 minutes and it just sat there. Now this paper, I don't know what it is. It is some kind of a stationery paper that I bought at, you know, somewhere. So I don't know exactly what it is, but it is thicker than copy paper, but not as thick as this, yeah, somewhere between copy paper and file folder paper. That's the thickness of this. But again, I think these came out pretty cool. Now these again were the white clover, the same flower. I just left a longer stem. And that's how those came out. I think these are pretty cool. This is also a weed that I had in the yard. Now see, these were a mistake, right? So I probably won't be able to duplicate these even though I like them. I probably won't be able to do this again. So you can see when I'm asked, well, how did you do that? I'm not being coy when I say I'm not sure or I don't know. I'm not making up stories. I really sometimes, look how cool that is. How did that happen? I don't know. Can I duplicate it again? Probably not. Would I like to? Yeah. So my answer, my long answer to you is if you're interested in this, you just have to experiment. You have to be willing to put the time in to experiment, have things go wrong, waste paper, be disappointed. Although I've liked everything, even though they may not have printed the way I thought they would or the way I think they should, I still like them all, They're like your kids. They might have little problems, they're a little rough around the edges, but they're still your kids, I shouldn't say that because I don't have kids, but that's what people tell me. Anyway, these are also some that I had frozen, these leaves. So these are autumn leaves that are being printed here. Now I started doing all this in the fall. So I don't know if these same leaves from the same trees, what they do when the leaves are green. So that'll be my big experiment this year, is to see how these leaves print seasonally. I only know what they look like when you print them in the fall. So that'll be fun for me to experiment with that. So anyway, this is a long drawn out explanation as to, if you ask me a specific question about a specific boil, I'm not, being evasive. I'm telling you that you have to really do it for yourself. You have to experiment. That first video that I made explains the basics. And then from there, it's all up to you how you want to experiment, what you want to throw in the water, what you don't want to throw in the water. I don't know what's going to happen before I put it in. I just do it. And if I like it, I take note. Oh, okay, I'm going to try that again, see what happens. If it doesn't work, hey, so be it. So don't be discouraged. Don't be disappointed if your first ones don't do what you think it should or what you want it to do, because it all comes with experimenting. I'm sure any other venture you got into, it did not work the first time, and you were persistent, and it came out pretty cool. Same thing with this. So anyway, I hope this answers your questions, why I can't answer your questions specifically. And that you don't think that I'm trying to be evasive. I'm really just telling you the truth. So I hope this inspires you to go out and try for yourself and see what you come up with, because they all can be used. Even if it doesn't print, you're still going to have some crispy paper that you can, crunchy paper that you can use in your journal, and it'll make that crinkly noise for you every time. And in that respect, you're going to be successful. So I hope I've inspired you to try something new and encourage you not to be disappointed, because they're not failures. It's ways that you're going to learn what works for you and what doesn't work. Now see, I don't know how I did that. I wish I knew, because I'd like to do it again. All right, get busy. Go around in your yard, start prancing around in your yard like I do, like some kind of fool, and go pick your weeds and start boiling.